Hey, ball fan, can't you hear me when I call? Hey, ball fan, can't you hear me when I call? Well, you ain't so.
Good afternoon, and welcome to Lunch with the Boss. Here I am today, Scott Tanker, host of Lunch with the Boss. As you know, we meet every Thursday from 12:30 to 1 o'clock, and we on RadioVisionNetwork.com. Keith, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, sir.
Tell you what, it's kind of cold out there for you folks in the northeast of the country. We're going to be okay because we've got 31 days until spring, Keith.
That's right.
10 days till pitchers and catchers report.
I'm not so worried about the Phillies pitchers again.
Not so worried about the Phillies these days. I love doing this show, folks. We talk about the relationships between employees and employers. We talk to people in all sorts of businesses, all sorts of walks of life, who can give us their information, their input, their experience on how to make the environment between employees and employers a better place. Because a happy environment is a happy employee is a more productive employee. And with that, I have a fantastic guest with me today, Brad Tornberg. Brad, how are you?
Good to see you, Scott.
Brad Tornberg has been in the, we're going to call it, business consulting business for many, many, many years. As young as he looks, he's actually a grandfather, so we'll tease him a little later. But he has been doing this kind of work, and he has written a book, he's done articles, he is an incredibly experienced expert in helping businesses become more profitable via his consulting and his operations management work. Brad, tell me a little bit about who you are, tell the audience who you are, where you came from, how you got into this crazy business, and then we'll go from there.
Well, it's kind of strange. I mean, way back in the 80s, the way that it used to work in the technology industry was if you knew a little bit, you probably knew more than most people did. So I kind of cut my teeth through technology in the area of finance. And what I found over the years was a lot of times I was being asked to help solve computer problems or technology problems. And what it ended up being, a lot of it was people and processes, not necessarily technology. And when you solve a technology problem, a lot of times people say, hey, while you're here, can you help me in this particular area? So by working with C-level executives and business owners, I've naturally gravitated towards working with them. Being an entrepreneur myself, coming from an entrepreneurial family, a lot of the issues and things that they deal with on a daily basis. So that's what kind of pulled me into E3 Consulting. And I wrote a book called Business Fitness Revolution, which if you look at the human body at 100% health means that all of the systems are functioning at their optimal. Now, business fitness is the same thing. The business is made up of a series of systems. And it all kind of started with a blog article about the dysfunctionality of the business owner. That lots of times the business owner would call me to come in and help them solve problems. Right. And a lot of times those problems ended up being the business owner himself. So we talked about the business owner being the brain and then how he communicates through the business body through the central nervous system to the employees. And realized that from that there's a lot of there's the digestive system, how well a business digests information and utilizes it, the circulatory system, how well money flows through the organization. And the book kind of compares the human body to the business body, what's healthy versus what's not healthy. And really what it is nothing more than a summary of the last 25, 30 years of working with businesses.
Well, it's interesting. I guess another part of that book could be Dante's Inferno, I guess. If you don't do all the right things, then you can look at how that works.
It's true. You know what they say, attaboys equals 1 crap.
That's right. Now, let's talk about the things that you find more often than not in businesses that create environmental distractions. Environmental meaning within the atmosphere of the business, not with respect to bad water or good water.
Sure. A lot of it is the way an organization works together. It's the way the business owner himself communicates with his people. It's the impression that the people get from him. I'll give the best example is a lot of entrepreneurs like to yell and scream. I'm from New York. I was born in the Bronx. That's the best way to deal with me, is to yell at me and scream at me, and you get your point through, and that's how I respond. However, there are certain people in an organization that if you speak to them in that tone, you're probably going to lose them as an employee. They're not going to be motivated, and if anything, they may actually become divisive in some cases. So what I try to do is go out and hear, you've heard the voice of the business owner. I like to hear the voice of the employees. How do they perceive things? How do they see things? Because it really comes down to, if you look at the companies that are successful, like the Yahoos and the Microsoft, there's a certain culture that exists within the organization. And a lot of times there's disparity in that culture, there's a gap in it. And the perception of the business owner who's calling you to do something is that he doesn't have the people who are doing things the right way, or he doesn't have people who are operating efficiently. But in reality, what it really is it's the business owner. And the fact that he puts walls around himself, people are afraid to approach him, people don't know how to react in certain situations, because a good entrepreneur doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be a good manager.
Right. Now, that is so very important, because I've owned a couple companies, I've been an employee, I've been an employer. At some point, as an employer, you say, you know what, this is my company, this is the way I do work, and if they don't beat to my drum, then they can go somewhere else. That can be very distracting and divisive at times. By the same token, though, as an owner of a company, sometimes you have to draw a line in the sand and say, you know what, this is the way we're going to do it. What I hear you saying, which is so important, I think, in personal and professional life, is the tone and how you say things. It's not as much as what you say, it's how you say things, how you get people to jump on the bandwagon, one way or the other. And you may be a Brooklyn guy who I can scream at, but the person to my left may be from South Carolina, and I got to speak softly.
Correct. Cultural differences. What you're talking about is very common. I talk about the business auditory, how we listen.
Right.
And it's very common that the messaging, and you look at social media today, and you look at email today, and the problem is there is no tone. And some people will react to you in a way when you get an email where you'll say, wait a minute, that's not what I meant to say.
Right.
So, the traditionalists, or the old people like myself, prefer a belly-to-belly mode. We like to talk, whereas most of the younger people today, including my 3 children, to get them to pick up a telephone, something major has to happen.
Act of Congress.
Act of Congress, right. Usually it's a text message, and there's an emoticon.
Or it's a money call.
Right, something like that. Or it's a money call, which is what it is more times than not, you're right.
You have girls.
That's what
We're
those-
just teasing. We love girls and guys.
That's right. But, the most important thing for a business owner is how well they listen. Because, as an entrepreneur, and you would know this as well, is that we're always right because it's our business and it's our way of doing things. And I think the business owners that are the most successful are the ones that realize they don't have all the answers, and that they build a network around them of people who they trust, and they listen.
How do you help owners get to that point? Do you help them hire? Do you help them fire? Do you help them introspectively look at themselves, look outward to their employees? There's a lot of work to be done here.
Yes.
How do you help a small business that needs some pretty quick help? And this is life stuff. This is like saving for retirement. It doesn't happen in one day.
Correct.
It happens over a long period of time.
There's a lot of answers within that question. The first and foremost is you have to set up a mechanism whereby you can facilitate communication. And most of the companies I go into that have that brokenness, or that level of non-communication, just by simply having a once-a-week bagels and bites meeting Monday morning where you bring in bagels and coffee and you sit around and you schmooze for an hour and a half or whatever it is.
Right.
It's worth so much, because what ends up happening is you begin to connect the dots by people who have their head down in their work all day. If something goes by them and they don't see it, they get frustrated because they feel like they're being omitted, when that may not be what the intention is. So you have to almost force communication, and I think that's something that a lot of companies don't make the time for. And I think that's why they have a lot of the issues that they have.
There's, by the way, folks, I'm here with Brad Tornberg, and a very experienced business consultant. Do not call him a coach, because he does much more than that. He does a lot of business consulting. He also works with operations management. He's written a book called Business Fitness Revolution. It's something you ought to read. It's someone you ought to talk to. If you do want to speak to Brad, and I recommend you do, his number is 732-735-6429. He's located in Voorhees, New Jersey, which is southern New Jersey, but he'll go anywhere to help, because I know I've seen him out there in Pennsylvania and North Jersey and things like that.
Have a gun will travel.
Yes. Now, I find this stuff very interesting. That's sort of why I have the show. The dynamics between employees and employers can make or break a business.
Agreed.
You could have 3 employees and one of them is on the same page, and it's a real problem.
My own personal challenge, scaling my company. The biggest challenge I've had over the last 30 years was attracting, retaining,
Rewarding.
incentivizing, and getting the business to grow. And the companies that are successful with that, that's where it kind of lies. You asked a question of, do you help them hire? As a general contractor, because that's what I kind of do in my consulting role, a lot of times it may just be a difference in terms of personality. So simple things like disc tests, which tell you the personality style. If I'm dealing with someone who's very task-oriented and I'm asking them to go out and sell for me, I'm probably going to have a huge disconnect.
Right.
But if I find someone who's who's task-oriented, that's the person I want working with me, because I'm not very detailed task-oriented. So by having someone like that, it's a compliment to what I do, and it makes 1 + 1 = 3.
What are some of the mistakes that, small businesses, because frankly, very few of us are Walgreens and Microsoft.
Sure.
So you work mostly with small, medium-sized businesses, I would venture to say.
All different sales.
Right, so, but focusing on the small business, because to me, that's the underbelly of our economy. What do these businesses either have to do, or what are they doing wrong that they have to fix?
Well,
now, communication you mentioned, but I want
Sure.
if you can even focus it down even more than that, specifics.
Well, let's put it under the subject of what you primarily talk about, which is employees. The biggest mistake that most business owners do is they hire someone who they like, who's like themselves.
Right.
And that's not necessarily what you want. You don't want another one of you. You want someone who's going to complement you and do the things that will help you be more efficient. In other words, a long time ago, I heard this story about, if you look at Frank Sinatra never sold tickets. Frank Sinatra never booked his gigs. Frank Sinatra would walk out, sing for 3 hours, turn around and walk out. Everything else was done by the people that were around him. If you subscribe to any of these motivational speakers and books, the Guy Kawasaki's, the Michael Gerbers of the world, there's a gentleman out there by the name of Dan Sullivan who has something called the Strategic Coach, and he teaches people, find out what you're really good at, and that is what you should be focusing your effort and energies. Everything else, you could spend the rest of your life becoming adequate at, but why do that? Why not find out what your unique competitive advantage is and really grow that, and then surround yourself
With the people who can fill the gaps.
And that's what most business owners don't do. They don't know when to let go. They don't know what point in their organization they need to make the transition to a formal structure, which means that there needs to be people in place to do multiple jobs, there needs to be people to manage those people, et cetera, et cetera. Instead, what the business owner does is try to do as much as he can, and when he has overload, try to farm it out to other people who may not be capable of delivering. There's frustration, there's anger, there's disappointment, there's all of those
Conflicting goals,
things.
all sorts of things.
Exactly right.
So what do? What I found is put things in writing really helps a lot. Create some structure. And you don't have to have total structure, but some structure of putting things in writing. Employees are I think adults are like kids who just have money. We all want to be wanted, we all want to have direction, we all want to have guidelines, and we all want to have affirmation, and we want to get a pat on the back. Oftentimes I speak to managers and say, you know what, these are adults. I don't want to baby these people. They know what to do, and let them go do it. And I have actually seen employees take that position and say, that's what I want out of life. I don't want anybody to bother me. Give me my job and let me go do it. And I've seen employees say, if it's in the morning, I better get a wake-up call because I'm not sure what I need to do today.
Correct.
Now, I'd like to ask you a couple more questions, but we do have to take a break. So Brad, we're here with Brad Tornberg, and his number is 732-735-6429. Market Simplicity. Brad, we'll be right back. And Keith, take us away.
Kick off your new year at the Croc Center, helping families achieve their full potential with fitness facilities, indoor competition and play pools, performing arts theater, educational programs, and fun for all ages, including seniors and teens on our 24-acre campus in the Kramer Hill section of Camden. Book now for birthday parties and corporate events. Monthly memberships start at $25 for a household of 4. The Ray and Joan Kroc Core Community Center in Camden, where potential meets opportunity.
My name is Karonda Jones. I'm the owner of Kitty Academy of Mount Laurel, New Jersey. The 4 pillars of Life Essentials are developmentally appropriate curriculum, technology, health and fitness, and character education.
They give great attention to each child. And my kids are happy at the end of the day. Academically, exposing them to the state curriculum early. He's getting the exposure with the alphabet and the numbers and reading and writing. So I'm really confident in him going to the next level.
This year they did little pictures with the kids, and they made like popsicle sticks and made their own frames, and it had a little picture. They were holding a picture that said, "I love you, Daddy," and literally that morning I melted. Everybody's friends here. Yeah, it's not like he comes home every day crying about the bully. It's like everyone's buddies.
The worst part about Kitty Academy is trying to get my kids to come home at the end of the day. They have so much fun.
Welcome back to Lunch with the Boss. I'm Scott Tanker, host with Lunch with the Boss, and I'm here with Brad Tornberg. Brad, thank you and welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
We were talking during the break about business process and how the process of business has fallen down, where people have not taken, especially the owners and supervisors, have not taken the pains to codify processes, codify rules, so that people understand their boundaries and their limits. Talk to me.
There's a lot of problems in the fact that it's like herding cats. If you don't clearly define what I call the rules of engagement, you're going to get what you're going to get at the end of the day. My consulting practice is primarily built upon three angles of a triangle: people, process, and technology. Most of the time when I get called in, it's because I understand business software and how to solve problems by adding software to it. That's my 30 years of background. That's where it started. So when I get in there, I'll realize that they don't have a software issue. They either have a people issue, which we've been talking about, but a lot of times it's process. They don't have formally defined processes. People can they have the freedom to do things the way that they want, and that causes a lot of issues within the company. We were talking during the break about, there's a book out by, it's called The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. It's a great read, and what it talks about is kind of building your business as a cookbook. And if you look at McDonald's, every McDonald's that you go to, the hamburger tastes the same, the French fries taste the same, and the reason being is that when you become a franchisee for McDonald's, they hand you a book that says, here's how you make a hamburger. And you don't put this on before that. In other words, you put the lettuce and the tomato on last so it doesn't get the meat wet and get the bun wet. All of those things that you kind of go through. So, proceduralizing your business is good. If you want to sell your business, it adds value to it. If you want to franchise your business, it's already there. If you decide to hire someone, it makes the learning curve and it explains your standard operating procedures so they ramp up much quicker, and there's much more value that's being added in a quicker time period. And what I call the Greyhound bus theory. If, God forbid, you as the principal have all of that information contained in your brain and you walk out and get hit by a Greyhound bus, then someone else can pick it up and run with it. So processes is just as important as having good people and having good technology.
So, and I happen to recommend certain things need to be in writing. Performance reviews, some rules and limitations, some boundaries. There's many businesses that don't really want too many boundaries because it stifles imagination. But I don't think we're talking about the same thing when I talk about that. I think people do need some guidelines to keep their heads on straight, because in today's world we have something called the tyranny of urgency. Everything is so important to get done so fast that we don't take our time doing it right the first time, and we usually accept 80% as acceptable.
And if you did it right the first time, you wouldn't have to redo it the second, third, and fourth.
Or do it even better, because sometimes you give it your shot, but it's an 80% shot because you're so busy, because you're so urgent to get things done that really you could have given it maybe another 10, 15, 20%, and maybe you would have ended up getting that piece of work as opposed to a semi-shoddy 80% effort, which you don't even realize you're doing because you're just so urgently trying to get things done.
And you're urgently getting things done because you don't have effective communication through the organization to establish what your priorities
and
are.
Efficiencies.
Absolutely.
So we've talked so much about employees, and I am an employee and I feel real for my employees, and I've owned companies with 13, 14 employees, and I've had mixed feelings sometimes. But I want to talk about now the employer. What can the employees do to make employer's job better, which in turn will make the employee's job better? It's not always the employer, right? Sometimes you see employee issues.
I think employees need to not feel intimidated by the employer. In other words, I as an employer welcome that feedback. If I'm an effective manager, put it this way, if I'm a manager that I want to work for, then I need to be someone who I can come to and talk openly about how I feel. Because, you just mentioned that 80%. It's all about continuous improvement. Nobody's perfect. What you really want to be able to get to with people is that they're constantly thinking of how they can make their job better, and if that means telling you things, who knows their job better than they do? So the employee can add value back to the employer by providing feedback, which is an effective method through communication, through a meeting.
So what I'm hearing, and we've been meeting with Brad Tornberg and E3 Consulting, right?
Yes, sir.
And his number is 732-735-6429. He's based in Voorhees, New Jersey. What I'm hearing from you is a lot of people don't codify and put in writing the very important issues of a company. Doesn't have to be everything, but the important issues.
Correct.
And they may be different important issues for one company versus another company, but they're still important to each company. And what I'm hearing is that people, the supervisors or the owners, are not taking the pains to put that kind of basic stuff down.
Correct, and the fear that you mentioned before, you've got to be careful. Too many constraints around people, like you said, really makes the employee uncomfortable. But you can go the other way too. Not enough boundaries around people
Right.
can be very destructive to not only the company, but to the employee's career path himself and his growth in the company. Because if the perception is, well, wait a minute, that's not what I want. I always tell this as an employee, I've always said this to my employers. There's a lot of things I am, but I'm not a psychic. I can't read minds.
Right. One of the things that has always bothered me throughout most of my life, personally and professionally, is what I call lack of communication. And it goes both ways. Sometimes I'm not even communicating properly when I thought I did. And when things tend to go wrong, it seems to me that there's just not enough communication and there's too many assumptions going on. How do you solve that problem in an office?
Boy, if I could figure that out, I'd be the richest man in the world.
We'd be on your yacht.
Absolutely. But you've hit on the fundamental point of why most businesses fail, why most employees leave companies, why most employers have heart attacks. It's because there isn't effective communication. And effective communication, believe it or not, always starts with listening, not with talking. And very few entrepreneurs and business owners have really mastered that craft of listening to other people and taking that information in, right? We talk about the business ears. That could mean the owner, how well he's taking in that information and being able to synthesize it into something that's going to improve the overall value of his own business.
How do you help someone like Scott, who I have to admit my father has always told me, Scott, you got one mouth and two ears, you need to listen twice as much as you talk, but you're not doing that. And I said, Dad, that's who I am. But so how do you help someone like me or someone who recognizes it, but needs the habits or tips, something that hints?
We'll create workshops. We create customized workshops. We have some, if you go to our website, which is www.e3businessconsultants.com, you'll see in there that we have a series of different workshops. Some of them are like, how do you build out your sales and marketing department? Effective communication and listening. And we'll put you in situations whereby you think you're hearing something and you'll find out that that's not what you heard.
Right.
It's kind of like whisper down the lane or telephone. So there's lots of different activities and things that you can do, but it really all starts with setting up a priority around communication. In other words, having a weekly meeting. And I always tell people, they're like, well, the problem with meetings are we have too many meetings. Well, I have a philosophy about meetings. Meetings should always be to decide, not to discuss. Communications for discussion should happen through portals or internal communications or places where people can share information. Mm-hmm. And then from that, when you get together, you have an agenda set up, you have a clearly defined path that you want to go down of what you want to accomplish. The problems with most meetings, which is why people don't have effective meetings, is people get in and they begin to go off into different tangents or different areas. Oh yeah, by the way, while we're on that, we need to consider this. And the next thing you know, you've sat through a 2-hour meeting and you've accomplished nothing that was on your original agenda. So what makes communications and meetings effective is having a taskmaster or leader. Some people will put an egg timer. You get a minute to talk. When the egg timer runs out, no matter where you are, you flip over.
You've got to be succinct.
Right. So you establish rules of how you communicate. It's the same way that you learned it in kindergarten, right?
Why don't people gravitate towards that? Why don't they gravitate towards, hey, this is how it has to be done so we can get things done, versus being insulted that there's an egg timer or something?
Because this is the society in which we live in.
Right. It's a me society.
It's a me society. It's a hurry up. It's a sense of urgency. Everything is the most important thing in the world. It used to be that when you would return as a technical support guy, 25 years ago, if I would return a client's call the next business day, I was considered to be excellent customer service. Today, if I don't call that client within an hour, I get questioned as to, why didn't you return my call? That shows you how our time continuum has shrunk significantly over just the last 10 years alone. It's Google and these things. You know, remember the days when we were in college and we would go to the library and we'd look things up and we would do research? Well, anything you want to know, if you don't learn it within the first 10 minutes, it's an irrelevant subject to you because you couldn't find it on Google.
Right.
And you moved on.
And that to me is bothersome and worrisome. It takes a little bit of the quality. Now, one of the things that I remember in the old days is literally getting together as a group and having a discussion before a decision. But now we're being asked to do all the discussion by email and by fax and by no real belly-to-belly discussion.
There's no discussion, Scott.
Yes.
If you think about it, just look at the society of our children, okay? Everything is face down in a device. There is a value in the market today. I'll give you a perfect example. I'm being asked by dentists and doctors to teach soft skills. How to listen, how to speak. How to, from a dentist who uses visual, how to get people to view that dentist as an authority. So that when the dentist says you need braces, they don't go out and shop them 3 other dentists. They believe who he is. I mean, basic communication skills, bedside manner. This is not something they teach today. They teach you the technical nature of what your task is that you need to do in your life, but never teach you how to communicate effectively with other people.
And it's actually getting worse because, as you know, with our kids, it's getting worse because they spend less time belly to belly. They go to dinner with 4 people and all of them are sitting on their phones. And they're actually texting each other across the table if they want because it's cute. It's a fun thing to do. But we've lost the quality of communications and even some of the quantity too.
You know what? And no one's teaching it, and these kids are unprepared when they go out into the job world and they're sitting in a job interview and people are looking at them, expecting them to react in a way of someone who's experienced.
They don't know how to react.
And they have no idea how to
But
react.
the world's changing, so those people who are acting like that eventually will be supervisors. And they'll be expecting people to act like the way they did, which is not having those kind of skills. I'm kind of worried about that.
Well, I am too, because when you're not having effective communication, you lose the tone.
Right.
And when you lose the tone, there's a difference between me saying, Scott, versus Scott.
Right. You don't get that in an email.
You don't get that in an email.
Right.
And I think it leaves way too much open for conjecture. Is that the word? I mean, you know,
Assumptions.
yeah, I mean, people can interpret the same message 27 different ways. When you're in front of someone, I mean, and it's a hard enough skill anyway. I mean, we practice it, most people who are in business practice it when they go out and they network. And when I network and I have someone who's younger in that room, I make it a point to try to talk to them because part of it's observational. I want to see, are they making eye contact with me? Is their handshake firm? You know, is this someone who I want to do business with that I respect?
It's an interesting environment, but that's why we're here at Lunch at the Boss, to talk about these interesting environments, these interesting dichotomies between employees and employers, and try to solve some of the age-old issues that occur in our businesses. If you were to give an employee 3 hints, 3 tips to be a better employee, what would that be?
The best one I got was from a supervisor who I worked for years ago at AT&T. Whatever business you go into, in the first 3 months, keep your mouth shut and listen. Because there's some things you're going to learn. And I call it my mafia. You know, I know George Anastasia. I'm very much into that whole mafia genre.
It's all fun. It's all good.
It's all
interesting,
good.
that's for sure.
Right. And in the first 3 months, by keeping your mouth quiet, you're going to learn who the true leaders are in the business. You're also going to learn who are the people that politically could possibly hurt you in your career. And they tend to be the ones who want to be your friends the quickest when you come out of the gate. It also gives you a chance to better understand what nature or what method of your own communication style is effective. If after 3 months you see that people are running around the office yelling and screaming at each other to get stuff done, then you know you're probably going to have to amp up the way that you talk. If you're an aggressive person like I tend to be and you walk into an environment that's maybe nonprofit or whatever and you don't do that for the first 3 months, you're going to realize that you're the big mouth and nobody wants you around. So the best first piece of advice is be quiet and listen. The second piece of advice is always to communicate, is to not be afraid to suggest ideas, but to do it in a way that is positive and proactive. And then the third thing is, if you don't have anything nice to say to somebody, don't say it. Keep it to yourself, internalize it. Always think twice before you hit enter on an email. I always tell people, never send an email out of anger. Always walk away from it, because sometimes calmer minds prevail. And remember something, as they tell you in the social media world, it's the same thing in being an employee or a new employee, is that anything you say
Can and will be held against you.
and remains public record.
And how about our friends, the employers? What 3 hints can we give them besides the one I know you're going to tell me is listen more?
Listen is obvious.
Engage your employees.
Listen and engage your employees is number one. Number two is realize as an employer that not everybody has your work ethic. As my father used to say, if they all were the same as you were, they'd be your competitors, not your employees.
It's so true. It's so true. You've been very, very helpful today. I would love to have you back on the show.
Love to be
Let's
back.
talk a little bit more before we end today about your business and your book.
Sure.
Tell us about your book.
Well, the book is really designed to sum up last 30 years of working with different businesses in different vertical markets. I mean, I've worked small to large, privately held companies, public companies, companies that have 20 people making a decision versus one person who makes every and any decision, including what office supplies we buy. And what I try to do was to point out, especially to business owners who are just starting out, that these are the kind of things that you need to be looking for in your business. These are the things that will make your business healthy. If you have a healthy business and your systems are functioning at 100%, then you're in place to grow and to make money. So, what I do is I help businesses make money. And a lot of people use that as their tagline, but I do, because sometimes I come in and I'm looking at how I reduce expenses and how to build efficiencies into their systems, how to get the right people into the right roles, how to develop processes so that everyone's on the same page, how to build out your marketing systems so that you can make money. So it's not just reducing expenses, but the reason I purchased and became a duct tape marketing licensee was because once I would put in a system, I noticed that a lot of people would say to me, "This is really great. Can you show me how I can use this to make more money? Or can you show me how I can generate leads now that I have a piece of software in place?"
And the book is recently come out?
It's on Amazon.com. It's The Business Fitness Revolution. Love for you to...
Why don't you tell our audience one more time about the book? And I want to make sure they hear it, because I'd love them to buy it from you. And it's from, go ahead.
It's Business Fitness Revolution. It is on Amazon.com. And again, if anyone's really interested in the book, you can call me, 732-735-6429, and the offer I'll make is the first 5 people who actually dial that number, I will send them an autographed copy of the book.
How about that? Now, for you folks out there who don't know Brad, I recommend strongly you give him a phone call. He'll speak to you, courtesy of the firm. He loves to help people. He loves to help businesses. That's something that that money doesn't always buy. It's just making sure that business is in good shape and that it moves forward and it can make money. That's a really good feeling.
I'll offer a free 30-minute analysis. You'll fill out a form. I'll ask you a series of questions. We'll get on the phone and we'll see if we can help you out.
I recommend strongly you speak to Brad at 732-735-6429, and his email is brad@e3help.com. Brad, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
Keith, another successful meeting.
Absolutely, as always.
Here we are, ladies and gentlemen, Lunch with the Boss, every Thursday from 12:30 to 1. We thank Brad for being with us. Keith, we thank him for being the producer that he always is. We thank you for listening and watching, and we want you to listen and watch every Thursday from 12:30 to 1 on Lunch with the Boss. This is your host, Scott Tanker, saying goodbye for now. Have a great week, and we will talk to you next Thursday.